Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Microsoft Data and AI User Group. My name is Adriano, your host. So, first of all, thank you very much for making the time to be here with us. It is an honor and privilege of your company. Now, as I said, we are here in South Florida. So, let us know, where are you located at? Use the live chat to enter your location. Today, what we're bringing to you is a fantastic presentation talking about security, Azure SQL, as well as encryption, authentic, and networking, all key elements to protect your Azure SQL database. Now, as I mentioned before, if you have any questions, use the live chat to enter your questions during the presentation. If the presentation has completed, use the comment section below. We will follow up with the speaker regarding your questions. Talking about speakers, today we have hosting Deepthi Goguri, fantastic presenter as well as a co-organizer here in the Microsoft Data and AI user group. And without further ado, let's bring in Deepthi. Hello, Deepthi, and welcome to the
Hello,
Microsoft
Adriano.
Data.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at our own user group. I'm so
Great to
honored to
have
be
you.
here.
Great to have you here. And can you tell a bit about you as well as the presentation?
Sure. Myself, I'm Deepthi Goguri, and I am one of the co-presenter, co-organizer for the Data and AI South Florida user group, and also I'm a DBA. I had more than 10 years of experience as being a database administrator. So today I would like to talk about Azure SQL security. This particular presentation I have given in the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference. So I thought this is a great platform here to be presenting it again. This is a fairly new topic that I presented for the Fabric Community Conference for the first time. But I gave this presentation a couple of times, but each time I give it, I learned something new. So today you would like to know more about, like, if you are not much familiar with the security, Azure SQL security, you will go through different layers of security today. So all the different kinds of security you have before touching the customer data. So we are going to talk about that.
Excellent. Sounds very interesting here. And before we get started, can you just set up your screen? Because right now I'm
Yes.
looking at, so
Once
you
you
can share
confirm,
your
then
presentation slide.
sure.
Yeah, because right now I see, yeah, there we go.
Are you
And
able to
do you,
see my presentation in the presentation mode?
yes. And do you have
Awesome.
anything that may be playing our presentation? Because I think I can hear some feedback. Is that coming from you there or not?
Feedback? No, I hear clearly.
All right, great. All right, I see your screen. Here we are.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Adriano.
Hey, thank
Okay.
you, Dipti.
Mhm.
And it's all you.
Awesome.
If-
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Microsoft Data and AI South Florida user group. Myself, I'm Deepthi Goguri, and today you are going to learn about secure Azure SQL database. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I'm a database administrator and all the different kinds of things that you are seeing here. I'm not going to talk about all of this because you can see it on the screen. But if you have any questions later, you can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And also I do blogging on dbnuggets.com. That's my website. So yeah, let's get started. So before starting and beginning this presentation, I would like to talk a little bit about a analogy that I would like to discuss here, which is a bank robbery. So let's say there is a thief He's a very experienced thief. He know how to break the doors of the bank. Let's say he want to rob a bank, right? There are different layers of security that he have to cross in order for him to touch the money vault, right? The vault that you are seeing on the screen at the bottom right side corner, that is a money vault. Even before touching the money vault, he have to break multiple doors. So let's say for the first layer of security that he have to, the topmost layer of security that he have to cross is the main door of the bank, right? But in order for him to cross, he need to somehow um, hide from the security cameras, because everywhere there is a security camera in the parking lot, right? So let's say he somehow managed to get into the main door and he broke the main door and he escaped um, from those security cameras by using the blind spots within the with the cameras. So somehow he broke that, but then he entered into the bank, and then now he saw so many different um, small boxes along with the locks in it, right? Those boxes are the lockers within the bank. If the customer save some money in their gold and diamonds, right? But he tried to open a couple of them, but he couldn't break it. So he thought like, this is not working. So let me go ahead. These are physical locks, though. He couldn't break it, so he thought like, and let me leave this because I want to directly go and break the money vault. And he will try to go to the money vault. But before entering into the room where money vault is located, he had to cross the digital lock. You know how the digital lock works, right? You select the code and then you press enter, and that's when the door will open if the lock is correct. If the digits that you press, the key is correct. But the thing is, he doesn't know the key, so he pressed couple of keys. It didn't work. So there is this multi-factor authentication setup, which he couldn't do it, right? He did not have that device with him, so he couldn't break that. So, and also, if there is this alert setup within the digital log where if couple of times the keys broke, the alert will directly go to the 911, as well as it will go to the security card. The alert will go to them. So he tried, but it didn't work, and the alert has already gone to the 911 as well as the security guard. So both of them are on their way, and even before he touched the vault, even before he touched the main door of the money vault, the police are here and they caught him. So if you see this scenario, did he ever break something? Of course, he broke the topmost layer of security, but did he ever touch the actual customer things? He never could able to touch the customer money or like assets or anything. He couldn't do anything, but he is already caught, right? In the same way, there are different layers of security in Azure. If there is a bad actor who is trying to break down the system and then go and enter into the data of the Azure customer data, he have to cross multiple layers of security. The topmost layer of security, which is like like the cameras, right? The security cameras in the parking lot, that is like the network security. That is the topmost layer of security. If the bad actor tries to cross that, then he have to access the access management, break the access management, then threat protection, information protection, and then once he break all of those protection layers, then he could able to touch the customer data. But these layers of security are a defense mechanism against your customer data, so it is not that easy to break the system, right? So we are going to discuss each and every single of this security layer today. So let's start about like I just put in words like what all we are going to talk about that described in the diagram. So let's move. So the topmost layer of security is the network security, right? So let's talk about different layers, different settings we have within the network security. The left side your screen, you see allow access to Azure services. As you move forward and as you move to the right, you see private link. The left side your screen, which you are seeing, allow access to Azure services, is the lowest secure option that you have. But as you move from left side to right side, the private link is the most secure one. Now let's talk about each one of these layers. Allow access to Azure services is Once you build your Azure SQL database, you will have an option just to turn on or off. That's allow access to Azure services. So once you turn that on, any any resource in any resource in Azure can connect to your database, because you are allowing any services within Azure can connect to your database, which is least secure, right? You do not want everything to be connected into the Azure. But if it is not secure at all, why is there this option, right? There should not be this option, right? But let's take a scenario where the developer is building the database and they want to make sure they are connecting to the application very quick without bothering about like all the security layers, but he wanted to quickly connect to the application and want to try to check on couple of scripts or whatever it is, right? Then in that scenario, for the testing purposes, for the development purposes, this option is available. But if you are in the production or even in the QA, it is not at all suggestible to turn this option on. Even for the development purposes, if you are having the development environment which is always there, then this option needs to be turned off, because whenever you build this database having this option turned on, then um, then anybody can see when they try to do the NS lookup, they can see the information of the database, like where the database is hosted, what is the public IP address, what is the DNS hierarchy, everything is shown in the public, which is not secure at all. So let's talk about a little bit more secure option. Then this option is firewall rules. Firewall rules is similar to the firewall rules that you create within your on-prem servers. It is the same way that you create the firewall rules in the Azure, right? When you build the database, that's where you will create the firewall rule for each of the service that is trying to connect to your Azure SQL database. It can be the on-prem servers as well. Once you create the firewall rule on your on-prem servers, that on-prem server can also connect to your Azure SQL database. So that is a little bit more secure option than the allow access to Azure services, but it is not totally secure, because when you do the NS lookup, the information, the public IP address is clearly shown, as well as the DNS hierarchy is also clearly shown. So it is not that good of an option either. Now let's talk about virtual network rules. This is more secure than the firewall rules, and there will be only one virtual network rule that you need to create, and all the other virtual networks that are trying to connect to your database will be only connecting to your virtual network rule. So once they are all connected to this one virtual network rule, that's when like you will be able to connect to your database, because your database is actually connected, actually living in this virtual network, right? So that's how you'll be connecting. But even then, when you do the NS lookup, the private there will be a private IP address given to you within that virtual network, but still it is not completely secure, because when you do the NS lookup, some information is still shown, like where is your database hosted, the region information, DNS hierarchy, those sort of information is still shown. But the most secure one will be the private link, because you'll be creating the um, you'll be creating the you'll be getting the private address, private IP address for your database, and it is most secure. Once you turn this on, once you create the private link by creating the private endpoint, then your database will be completely secure, because the internet access will be completely turned off at this point of time. It will block all the public access. So that is first itself, that is secure, because none of the internet can connect to your database. Only services which will have the access to that private endpoint can only connect to your database. So it is like a whoever will have the key, they will only can enter the house. That is all it is, right? So that private IP address. So even though you do the DNS lookup, you can't see the information. Everything is secure here. Now let's see, when I say about like allow Azure services and resources to access the server, which is the least secure one. Once you connect to the once you connect to the portal.azure.com, once you go to your server, which is a security demo here, that I'm using for my demo, you'll go to the security tab. Underneath the security tab, we are talking about the network security. So that's when you'll click on the networking tab here. And once you click on the networking tab, you can see the number one pointer, allow Azure services and resources to access to this server. Now make sure to turn that off, which is like uncheck if that is checked, right? That should be always turned off. And the second option which we talked about is the firewall rule. The firewall rule is like here you will be adding the firewall rule of any services that you wanted to connect, right? So what I did was I tried to connect from my local SSMS from my local server. So I added that IP address so that I can connect from my management studio. The next one is like this is where I added that IP address to that firewall rules. I created the firewall rule. So that's where I could connect from my local management studio to the Azure SQL database. But what about the virtual network, right? The virtual network, you will be able to create the virtual network here um, with a couple of information. I'm not going to talk much about virtual network, but let's talk about the more secure one, which is the private endpoint, right? You will be creating one private endpoint per database, and to create that, I'm not showing every single step on how to create it because it will only require like some basic information to create the private endpoint. But once you create the private endpoint, you will try to connect to the Azure SQL database, um, Azure SQL database on where your VM hosted. So I am connecting the Azure SQL database, which have the private endpoint from my virtual machine, from my virtual machine, right? So I try to connect from my virtual machine to the database. So I try to connect using the private endpoint. So when I did the NS lookup, like I tried to check the client net address from the system execute connections. I did run this query from that virtual machine, um, where the database is actually connected to that virtual network. We have access from that virtual network where I created the virtual machine. That virtual network have the access to the private endpoint, right? So I did select and I received this um, output as 10.0.0.7. Now, if I see in the portal, Azure portal, my virtual machine, I try to look into the virtual machine on the Azure portal. That virtual machine is showing the private address, private IP address. But if you see the public IP address, it do have, but it will always show the private IP address. The information is secure. Now let's talk about the identity and access management. There are two different types of identity and access management: authentication and authorization. Authentication is nothing but like whoever is trying to logging into the Azure portal or any Azure services, you need to make sure you need to let the portal know that you are the right person who is trying to access that information, trying to logging into the portal. For example, you have the multi-factor authentication to protect that, right? By using the multi-factor authentication, you get the code to your phone where you need to enter that authentication code into the portal. That's when it will know that you are the right person because you have that another authentication that you have to do, and you are the right person, so it will make sure you are entering into the system. So that's a multi-factor authentication is one of the authentication layer of security, right? So you are proving as the right user, and both the Azure SQL and the managed instances supports the SQL authentication as well as the intra ID authentication, or it can only support like a intra ID authentication only. But when you are building a SQL server, logical server for your Azure SQL database, the principal way, like you will be giving a principal, the you have to give a you have to give an ID and password to create a logical server. Now that ID and password, that login ID and password will automatically will become the server level principal. And if you're for the managed instances, when you're building, you need to give an a logic, you need to give a ID and password. That credentials, that principals will become the sysadmin server role automatically. And when you come to the authorization, it is all about the access to the resources itself, like the data within the tables, right? So how are you giving the authorization to the users? It can be through the database roles, it can be the custom roles. For the Azure SQL and the managed instances, you have the database and as well as the custom roles that you can build. You can also give the row level security because you just can't give the reader to the entire database. If you do not want to do that, you can also do the row level security because you wanted to give the least privileged always. So when I mentioned that the login ID and password that you give while building a logical server or the managed instance, that login ID and password will automatically will become the server role, right? Server role admin. So here I built a DG test server is a logical server. Underneath that I have my Azure SQL database. But here I have given my server admin as Deepthi. So that Deepthi will automatically will become the server admin. And a couple of more details on role-based access control. So role-based access control is like what can and cannot be done to the resources itself within Azure. So there are some default roles that we have within Azure: owner, contributor, and reader, all the default ones, right? There are several others, but we are going to talk about the basic default ones available. So owner can actually, when you give the permission as an owner, they can do everything. They can read the resource, modify the resource, as well as assign other people to the resources. Right? The contributor can just read the resource and modify, but they can't assign other people as they can't assign other people as a contributor. They can't assign anything. They can only read and modify. And reader can, as their name suggests, they can only read the resources, right? And these permissions, these role-based access control permissions can be given to the subscriptions, to the resource groups, and to the resources itself within the resource groups. And it can also be inherited, right? It can also be if you give the permissions all the way at the top and also want to be inherited, you can also choose that. So when I say role-based access control, there are three default roles, right? To see them in the portal itself, if you go to the DG test server, which is our logical server, underneath that, you can see on the left side, you can see access control IAM. Once you click on that, you need to click on add role assignment to see the default roles. Once you click on that, it will show all the default roles that you can choose from. So there are like three: owner, contributor, and reader that we actually discussed in the previous slide. So these are the ones. There are the rest of the ones. There are several of them actually. You can look into this, but these are the three default roles. And you can choose the role, you can add the members to the role, and then you can review and assign them to the resources. Now, what about logins and users? What are the differences between managed instance and the Azure SQL database? There are not much differences. Usually, when you like you can build SQL or Azure Active Directory logins, which is like Entra ID logins on the managed instances. You can also um, you can also create the database users as well as contained users. Without login, you can directly give access to the databases. They don't have to have a login. That's called contained user, right? And the login ID, how you created the managed instance, that will automatically become the Entra ID server admin, like I mentioned. And when you come to the Azure SQL database, you will have the same Entra ID server admin as well. But the difference here is like you can create um, you can create you can there are certain roles that are automatically different from the managed instance. There is a role which is the DB manager role, just to limit the number of admins we have for the database. We have DB manager role, login manager role, as well as SQL. We can also create the SQL logins here. But then if you want to um, create any login on the Azure SQL database, you definitely have to log in as the server admin only, like enter ID, server admin only. Any other users can't create any other logins on the Azure SQL database. And even here, you can create the database roles. Even here, you can create the contained users, including the enter ID. Now, data encryption is a whole big animal, I can say. But let's talk about different layers of data encryption that we have, right? It's actually protecting the data itself, data layer, right? So we have different types of protections we have here that you can choose from, which is encryption in transit, encryption at rest, encryption in use. Encryption in transit is like when your data is moving from and to, like from the database to the application and from the application to the database. While it is in the transit, which is like moving, your data needs to be protected through the wire, via the wire, while it is moving, right? So this is by default enabled, and it is always encrypted by the by the transparent layer security. And encryption at rest is about the database files, log files, backup files. These are the uh, this is the data which is staying on the drive system, right? So is it protected? Yes, it is always protected by the transparent data encryption. So there is also another layer which is encryption in use, which is like while the data not only moving within and within the application, or like from the application to the database and database to application, that is known as encryption in transit. But encryption is in use is while the queries are being processed within the engine, right? Are our queries being processed within the like are our queries um, encrypted while they are being processed, right? So we have that option as well. So let's talk about encryption in transit. Like I mentioned, it is a industry standard protocol, uh, transparent layer security. So it is always enforced all the time for all the connections. It is enforced. All you have to make sure from your end is to make sure your applications are supporting the version of the TLS that you are turning on from the Azure SQL database. So different types of versions are coming up. Sometimes the old ones are deprecated. So whenever you are keeping this TLS version updated within your Azure SQL database, you need to always make sure your applications are supporting that TLS version, and you need to also make sure you are always enabling from your application this option, encrypted connection from application, should always be turned on. So we talked about like TLS, right? But where do we see this TLS? In the DG test server, which is like a logical server, underneath the networking blade, you will be seeing the connectivity tab. Underneath the connectivity, encryption in transit, there you will see the minimum TLS version, and you can see the different TLS versions available. You'll choose the TLS version and also make sure your application is actually supporting the TLS version, right? Encryption at rest, like I mentioned, data which is inactive on the drives, database files, backup files, as well as log files. And it is real-time encryption and decryption of the data, because while the data is accessed from the drives, it should be decrypted, and then while it is moving to the disk, it should be encrypted, right? It is always enabled by default. And there are two different ways you can turn this on. You can choose if Microsoft have to manage the key, you will choose Microsoft managed key, which is by default enabled. But if you think like, let us decide how to manage this. So we will create our own keys, we will build our own keys, and we will also make sure we are responsible to rotate the keys as well, which is a little bit hectic on the customer side. But then if you still choose that, depending upon the depending upon your application and the database and the type of data that you have in the database, if you choose like, let me decide, like, let's take care of this, all of this encryption at rest part, you will go ahead and choose bring your own key. BYOK means bring your own key. You will be actually creating this key, and then you'll be saving it in the key vault. So where do we see this? Where do we see this transparent data encryption, right? TDE, um, like to protect the data on the disk, right? So security demo is one of the SQL server that I have created. So I have gone through the security layer of transparent data encryption. Once you click on that, you will see all of these options. Transparent data encryption, if you see two of options there, service managed key and the customer managed key. Service managed key is nothing but the Microsoft managed key, right? So the second one, service managed key, you just click on the radio button, that's it, you are done. But we want to go a little bit further to see how to actually build our own key. So to do that, we need to click on customer managed key, and then under the keys selection method, you will click on select a key, because once you click customer managed key, you should be able to select the key and click OK, right? But let's say we do not have any key here. We want to build a key, right? Before building a key, we need to first have the key vault. Key vault is very not that of a costly thing. So you can build multiple key vaults within your Azure. Depending upon your projects, depending upon your applications, you can actually divide them. It is low cost, so you can do that. You will build the key vault, and then now you have to create the key, right? So go to the keys. Once you create the key vault, go to the keys, and inside the keys, I already created two keys, right? But then I want to choose one of these key. Let's say. So let me choose one of the key, security demo one. And security demo one, if you see, there is some information here, current version. The current version will automatically be popped up when you create the key. And you can also see the activation date and the expiration date. Now, once you click on this, you can see what all information is needed to create the key, right? So key type, RSA, key size, all of them are automatically popped up. But the thing is, you will be um, giving the most information, the important information to remember here is to give the activation date as well as the expiration date. And mm, if you see, you can also enable and disable here, as well as you can actually give the tags, and then you can also give the permission options. Whoever will have the access to the key vault, whoever will have the access to this key can actually encrypt and decrypt. So that is what you are saying, like what kind of operations can be permitted when that particular user will have the access to this key. We will have the encrypt as well as the decrypt operations permitted. So you'll click on that here itself, here and there itself. And then once you do that, you can also go to the access policies within the key vault itself, and see, you can actually give the users the unwrap and wrap the key to get the key, right? You can actually select the users here to give the access to the keys. I have added my user here, Deepthi Goguri. Now what I did, I created the key vault. I wanted to actually choose bring your own key method. So I clicked on the customer managed key. And then since I do not have a key, I went ahead and I built a key vault, and I created a key. And then while creating the key, I gave the activation date and the expiration date. I also clicked on like what kind of operations are allowed to the person who have access to that key. And then I added the access to the key. By going to the access policies, I also gave the permissions to the user, which is Deepthi Goguri. Again, you gave the permission to Deepthi Goguri, right? And then you come back again to the transparent data encryption, and then go ahead and click on change key. Once you click on change key, it will ask you like select the key, give me the key details, right? I will use that key again to encrypt the data on the rest. So key vault, you are clicking on the key vault, you are giving the subscription details, clicking on the key vault, and then key vault name and a key name. You can drop down and see within all the keys, you can select the right key. And then when you click on the right key, it will also give the version of that key. Now, when your key is um, expired, you can come and create the new version to this key right at this place. If you see the create new version, you can actually click on that, and you need to change all of that to rotate the key. And then click on select. By selecting that, you can actually give the new key, right? And then do not forget to click on save. Now we have seen the encryption at rest. Now let's talk about encryption in use, right? This is a client-side encryption technology while the data gets encrypted, decrypted from the client side, right? From the client side and from the DB side, from the database side, so the data is always encrypted. We know that, right? So there is a client driver that will actually encrypt the data sent from the application to the database. Now let's go ahead and see how that is actually being done by using the secure enclave. By using the SQL client driver, the data, the sensitive data which is in use will be protected, which is a client side protection layer. So even while the data is being processed, so there is this SQL driver in between, right? In between your Azure, in between your database engine as well as the database client. While your data is being processed and then giving back to the client driver, the data is still protected. The engine within the data, within the database, it knows, but while it is being processed, the data is sent to the client driver encrypted. And from there, the SQL driver, from the SQL driver to the database client, the data is decrypted. So SQL client driver is acting as a encryptor and decryptor here. It is very much useful for the queries like the pattern matching, um, rich queries, like for example range queries, sorting, indexing, those sort of queries. Those will be actually helpful to get processed with by using this type of encryption. So basically, if you see on the slide, left side of the screen, the database engine will delegate the operations on the encrypted data to the enclave where the data can be safely decrypted and processed. That's a encryption in use while the data is being processed. Now let's talk about dynamic data masking. Again, um, we are talking this underneath the security layer. You see there is dynamic data masking, right? We are clicking on that and we see we can actually mask the data itself. So the data itself on the disk is completely different, which is like a data at rest is totally different from the dynamic data masking. Because when you do the dynamic data masking, you are actually selecting the data, and the results that you are seeing as an output, that data will be masked, right? It is not the same as the data being protected on the disk. These two are two different things, right? Only the output, when you run a query, the output will be shown as a um, masked thing with the masked functions. It is similar to the dynamic data masking that you have on prem. The same way, you can go ahead and add the mask. And when you click on add the mask, it will ask you some of the similar simple things like a table, column. You can choose the table, column within the table, and then add the mask function. It will give you the default mask functions. You can choose that, and then you can save. Now let's talk about threat protection and detection, right? You need to, if there is a bad actor, or like there is some person who is trying to access your database from an unknown location, that is a threat detection, right? You need to get an alert for that. Hey, somebody else from this particular IP address is trying to access your database, just block it. Like we need to be alert where like firewall rules are blocking this sort of activity, and like all sort of different layers working together to protect your data. Threat protection and detection will capture the threats. So there is an Azure Defender as well as Azure SQL auditing that you have. And underneath the Azure Defender, you have SQL vulnerability assessment as well as SQL threat detection. SQL vulnerability assessment is sort of like it will compare your configuration with the Azure standards, Azure Microsoft Azure standards, and it will check, like it will give you a big, huge list of vulnerability assessment details. You can just go through it and see like if you have to actively ignore those, or like you need to take some action on those assessment details. I mean, it is your data, your database, and you can either ignore or you can take those assessment details and implement those recommendations, right? And you will also have SQL threat detection, where you'll get any threats within the um, like connections while somebody is trying to connect. If there is a if there is a like sort of threat, then those alerts will also be sent, and you can see that information in the Azure Security Center. You can also do the Azure SQL auditing. It is similar to the on-prem auditing that you have. You can audit your data. You can start collecting the information, what is being run, and who is running what, right? Those sort of things. So let's talk about Azure Defender. So once you go to the server, you'll have the auditing option within the security, right? Underneath the security, you see auditing as well. So click on auditing, and it will ask you Microsoft Defender for SQL. You can turn it on or off, but here we wanted to turn it on. But this is like a application, like this is like an app. You need to purchase that. Microsoft Defender for SQL will cost $15 per USD per server per month. So it includes what vulnerability assessment as well as the advanced threat protection. So you need to turn it on. By reading that, you know that you are incurring the price, some amount of money, right? Per month per server. So you're turning that on, as well as you have to give some details over here. Subscription details. What is your subscription ID? And then, do you want to store this information? And you can select a storage account if you want to choose, as well as if you want to send the scan reports to your DBA group, or like to your office account. You can actually give those scan reports, send the scan reports to that account, and you can turn it on. Now, once you turn it on, I let it run for a couple of hours to give this demo information. So, and then I came back to the DG test server. I went to the security blade. Now I clicked on Microsoft Defender for cloud, and I have seen a couple of recommendations here, 6 recommendations. But to see the complete list, I have clicked on view additional recommendations, and I have seen a different view here in the recommendations. The red color will represent like there are the active items that you need to look into. Green color represents like everything is good, healthy, but red color is like a kind of unhealthy. You need to look into it. So I have seen all of this information, and you can either take the recommendation or ignore. But I can also go and see the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, not only at the server level, but also at the database level. You can go to the server, uh, you can connect to the logical server, go to your database, click on your database, as well as um, after you click on the database, you can see the security blade right on the left side. Click on Microsoft Defender for Cloud. It will take you to similar kind of window, but at this time, not at the server level, but at the database level. Right here, the recommendations are 0, but there are 3 findings over here. I would like to click on view all recommendations in Defender, and also underneath the database, I will be seeing the vulnerability assessments as well. So I have seen couple of vulnerability assessments here, which are 3 findings here. Once I click on findings, it gave me the 3. So the IDs, as well as what is that ID means, and what is the severity level. Now IDs are automatically popped up, right? Um, that is controlled by Microsoft, right? So you'll see the severity, which is 2 or high. So it says, let me click on one thing, which is database owners are as expected, but the severity is showing as high. Now, once I click on that, if you see database owners are expected, the name, it looks like it's a good thing, but it is showing the status as unhealthy. Now, what is that? If you see the remove unnecessary database owners to avoid granting excessive permissions or update the baseline to reflect the approved list of owners. Now it is saying like too many people have the owner permissions, right? Remove the people who do not want to have the access. So you can either um, add these results as a baseline, remove the people. It will also give you the query that you can execute on the database so that it will take the action, or you can just remove it from the baseline. You can either ignore or you can take the action upon the query, right? You also have readily available the query readily available. So it is up to you, but it is up to you to decide which one to ignore or which one to take. These are the vulnerability assessments, right? Now let's talk about the auditing, right? Auditing is similar again, similar to the SQL Server on-prem auditing. DGTest server is our SQL server here. Underneath the security blade, we are talking about all of the different layers of security. Now we are clicking on auditing. Click on auditing, which will open up the Azure SQL auditing. There, it's a on or off thing, right? Once you turn it on, um, you can either choose a storage account or you can either choose a workspace, log analytics workspace, which is a Power BI workspace that you can build, right? You can create either a new one or you can use the default workspace, or you can also send the data to the event hub. You can choose different options. And at the bottom, you see one option, enable audit of Microsoft support operations. So you need to turn this on, like this is a suggestion, not a necessary thing. But when you turn it on, like Microsoft, if they have any questions, or like whenever you are having an issue with Azure, and you need to work with the Microsoft support teams. If they have the ability to look into your auditing information, this option needs to be turned on. Only then they can have the ability. So once you turn that on, to see the information, you'll go to the database because I want to see at the database level. You'll go to the database, AdventureWorks, Azure SQL database, click on auditing, and you'll see view audit logs. I kept it running for a couple of hours. So I got the audit records. Once I click on that, you'll have a view dashboard. So I'd like to see it in the dashboard. In the dashboard, if you see underneath the overview, it says workspace, default workspace. So it is linked up to the workspace, right? It is giving you a beautiful report. So there are two different things here. One is a circle and one is a bar graph. I would like to click on the bar graph, Azure SQL Security Insights. Once you click on that, you will see all sort of different information here. Audit distribution data, it shows like 156. It will also show you the action name, batches completed, database authentication, RPC completed, those sort of activities. Now, once you click on that, you'll see more details into it. You can actually run the queries, you can edit the queries, and then you can run and see the information. But in the result, you will be able to see all the events, security events, what statement has been run, on what object it has run, what is the database, what is the instance name, and all that kind of information, right? So you can see that. And the last but not least, the data governance, which is a data classification. You can also classify your data based upon the severe, like based upon the sensitivity of your columns. Like for example, you have an SSN number, you have some phone numbers, addresses, or like even more sensitive data like PII data, personal information data like passport number, SSN last four digits. Those sort of information are very important, right? They are personal information. So to classify such kind of columns, you can actually come to the security blade again underneath the database, go to the data classification and discovery, and you can. It is very easy to set it up because all everything is drop down. um, you can choose the table, column, and sensitivity label. You can choose the sensitivity label, either highly confidential, or those sort of sensitivity label. You can go ahead and choose. Once you do that, you will have the classification, label distribution, and information type distribution shown in the in this circle charts. But then what will happen once you classify your data? What is the benefit, right? So this information is being tracked by the auditing. Anybody try to access these type of classified data with the highly confidential information, anybody touches that, like they do the select but touches that column and try to pull the data, you will get a log record of how much. It will clearly show you in the audit logs what sensitive data is being viewed. So once you do that, I will go ahead and let it run for some time to see if so, and then I run many queries to see like again I'll go to the same default workspace where these audit logs are getting captured. So I go to the audit records where it mentioned clearly number of queries with the sensitive label on the left and number of queries by information type on the right. Now I would like to click on the number of queries by information type. Now here you can clearly see, once you run the query, it will show you like all the columns that I have labeled as highly confidential. Those queries which are run, all the information related to who executed those sort of columns, who try to access those sort of columns which are highly confidential, that is being shown. So this is kind of an overview of the very huge, like we can talk on this topic for at least 8 hours in a day. It can become an entirely if I can do the training, it can be an entirely day training. But the thing is, I have put all of that into one single session as an overview. So if you would like to see the extension of this session, I have written a blog post under the dbanuggets.com underneath the category Azure. You can check that. But I highly suggest you to go ahead and look into these resources. There are up till like 7 to 8 videos. Each video is about like 1 hour, 1.5 hour, only talking about security. Um, so if you can go through these resources and watch it, that would be nice. You'll get a extended version of this session. So, and also I would like to thank you one more time um, for watching this session, and for taking your time this evening and for waiting for me, because I'm a couple of minutes late for the presentation. But I would like to thank Adriano, for giving me this great opportunity to present. And thank you, one and all, and have a good night. If you have any questions, Adriano can let me know so that I can answer the questions.
Yes, definitely. So as Deepthi just said, if you folks now have any questions for the next minute or two, please use the live chat and enter your question. If the presentation has completed, use the comment section below, enter your questions, and we'll follow up with Deepthi and get back to you with an answer. Now, I also would like to say definitely a fantastic presentation by Deepthi, who
Thank
had
you, Adriano.
a thank you. That was like, how can I say, a deep insight into security and learning more about the technology here. So really appreciate that. So as our topic for securing your Azure SQL database. And as you saw, all the little details here where we learned about all the different layers, not only that, but also how to do different setups that Deepthi walk us through here. So simplifying the process for all of us to be able to go afterwards, at least get started quickly on that, coupled with the resources she has provided. And don't forget, and that provides you, a good starting point. Now, also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the presentation with your colleagues. I'm quite sure. And also the blog, Deepthi shared the blog address there. We're going to put this also in the comments here a bit later so you can have a reference. So you can no longer complain. Come back, rewatch the video, watch the parts you want to see, refine, update your solution there because Deepthi gave you like some amazing information there. Thank you very much, Deepthi.
Thank you, Adriano.
And so, Deepthi, just hang on a couple minutes after we disconnect here. Now, folks, if you have any follow ups, as I mentioned, drop in the comment section. And for you, thank you all very much for your time and for making it all possible. So, we need your likes and subscribe, share. Thank you. Good night, you all.